Bienvenidos una semana más al podcast de ITNIC. Esta semana estamos con Niklas Adalberth y Marc Jordana. Niklas fue fundador de Klarna y junto con Marc están abriendo Norrsken Barcelona. Klarna, como muchos conoceréis, es un proveedor de soluciones de pago que el fundador sueco montó para ayudar a las compras online y a diferir los pagos. Niklas nos va a contar todo su viaje, desde la fundación de la empresa hasta llegar a un gran éxito y cómo en un viaje a Las Vegas decidió que tenía que encontrar un nuevo rumbo en su vida. A partir de esa reflexión, decide fundar Norrsken. Norrsken es una fundación que tiene como objetivo promover la emprendeduría de alto impacto. Niklas nos habla de qué significa el impacto en la sociedad, así como en el medio ambiente. Aquí hablaremos con Niklas y Marc de qué significa el altruismo efectivo, que según palabras de Niklas es ayudar más con la cabeza que con el corazón. Hablamos de que la rentabilidad no está opuesta al impacto. Es más, Niklas defiende que es necesaria la rentabilidad y los retornos financieros al grande impacto que puede tener las inversiones altruistas. Norrsken abre en Barcelona el año que viene el mayor centro dedicado a promover el altruismo efectivo y la emprendeduría sostenible de alto impacto. Marc Jordana, como cofundador y CEO de Norrsken Barcelona, nos contará los planes que tiene Norrsken en nuestra ciudad. El año pasado, 2021, Norrsken ya invirtió en 8 nuevas compañías de alto impacto. Estas empresas ya han generado más de 1.700 empleos y un impacto positivo en la sociedad. Marc y Niklas nos cuentan el rol de Barcelona en este ecosistema y sus planes para el futuro. Niklas es sueco y no habla español, por lo cual hemos hecho esta entrevista en inglés. Activa los subtítulos y disfruta. Este episodio lo patrocina The Nest. Os dejo con nuestros compañeros de The Nest para que os expliquen más.
Gracias, Bernat. Mi nombre es Dani Guardans y soy el responsable de The Nest aquí en España. ¿Qué es The Nest by WebHelp? Nosotros somos líderes en la externalización de la experiencia del cliente para startups y scale-ups. ¿A qué me refiero con esto? Nosotros somos líderes en el servicio de atención al cliente, en experiencia del usuario, en servicio de ventas, hasta moderación de contenido. Somos 140.000 empleados en más de 200 países, hablando 80 idiomas, con una disponibilidad 24/7 para que vosotros, como scale-up, os centréis en el core de vuestro negocio y nosotros seamos el partner que os acompaña con ese crecimiento. Si queréis más información, me podéis contactar a mi email daniel.guardans@webhelp.com o, si preferís, podéis ir a nuestra web, que es thenest.webhelp.com.
También, como siempre, este episodio lo patrocina Factorial. Factorial es el software que ayuda a pequeñas y medianas empresas a automatizar todos sus procesos de gestión de personas y a sacar mejores datos para tomar buenas decisiones. Os invito a que veáis la página web de factorialhr.es si en tu empresa necesitáis mejores procesos. Y finalmente, este podcast es posible gracias a todos vosotros, nuestra audiencia y la comunidad de ITNIC. Os agradecemos que nos escuchéis y os invitamos a que os suscribáis a nuestra newsletter y a que atendáis los eventos que hacemos los jueves en Barcelona. Muchas gracias y os dejo con Niklas y Marc y la historia de Klarna y Norrsken. Espero que lo disfrutéis.
El emprendimiento mueve el mundo. Aquí aprendemos de las personas que lo ponen en marcha. Bienvenido a las historias de startups de ITNIC.
Welcome to another episode of the ITNIC podcast. Today we've got Niklas and Marc, and we're going to hear the story of Klarna and Norrsken, and what is Norrsken doing now in Barcelona. Welcome. Niklas, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, where should I start? I guess I go all the way back. My father always told me that you can do whatever you want in life as long as you become a doctor. Doctor like him, obviously. And I was always competing together with my brother who could perform the best. I always had this performance-based self-consciousness. So if I perform and do good in school and so on, then I get a self-fulfillment.
Were you good in school?
Also right.
Okay.
I liked gaming too much, I guess.
Okay.
That was a disturbance.
And that was in Stockholm?
This was in Uppsala. So it's 1 hour north of Stockholm, but it was in Sweden, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but I quite early got a motivation for becoming financially independent. Mm-hmm. And in Sweden, you can't be that by being a doctor. So I went in to study business school at the Stockholm School of Economics. And just a couple of months into business school, my friend Sebastian came up with the idea of Klarna. Mm-hmm. And this was all a coincidence. Me and Sebastian were traveling around the world the year before without flying. And we missed the last boat, or one of the boats across the Pacific Ocean. Mm-hmm. So Sebastian could not come back to school and do his master degrees. He has to pass one year. And during that sabbatical year, he started working at the debt collection salesperson. And
so it was like the random job that he could find.
The random job.
Okay.
This was 2003. It was really hard for him to find a decent job. So this was a job he could find.
Okay.
And it was in this position he got in contact with e-commerce companies that said that we don't want your debt collection, but we would love to offer a solution where consumers can buy now but pay later.
So e-commerce were struggling with debt collection?
Yeah, we're struggling with payments overall.
With
People
payments
didn't
in
trust
general.
to give away their credit card number.
Okay,
So they wanted
that
to
was
pay.
before Stripe.
Yeah, many years before Stripe.
That was before all of the other like platforms that made it very easy to pay.
Exactly.
But why pay later?
Yeah, because of the sense of security that you don't have to give money first and then touch and feel the product. I mean, if you go into a physical store, do you need to pay first before you're allowed to enter in? Just like mimicking that consumer behavior. And that's when you got the idea that why don't, if we do a simplified credit check on the consumer, maybe we can allow them to get a credit for 14 days and then pay after delivery.
So was it really the original idea? It's like people want to buy online. They don't want to pay before they see the item. Then we do a credit check. Then we send the item. Then we charge them. And then we make a commission and interest payment.
Exactly.
It was exactly this idea right away.
It was. And then later on we
That's
added...
usually not the case.
It's not usually the case. No, it's not.
We tend to pivot and iterate.
Exactly.
Okay.
But
And at what point do you get involved?
So Sebastian was the debt collection agent at this. He presented this to the management of the company. They didn't approve it really. Then he went back into study, and I started the same school. And then he talked about this idea to some friends, and me and another friend called Victor. And we said that, hey, let's give this 6 months and see what happens. But I guess the issue was that, I mean, to start a fintech company, you need to have some money. We had no money. You need to have some experience of how to develop the system. We had no knowledge of that whatsoever.
No,
and
you're
no
not
knowledge
developers.
of
You're not
developers. We're all three business guys. And we were supposed to build this like financial systems with no knowledge or know-how whatsoever. So it was kind of uphill to start with. But we realized that, hey, we let's start with the money. So we went out we built a pitch deck, and we went out pitching to what we could find in the business papers, the most wealthy people in Sweden. I mean, business angels didn't really exist back then. So we just phoned them up that, hey, we have this idea.
2004 we're talking about?
Yes, 2004.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
It's a while. And eventually we were able to get in contact with an angel called Jane Valerud that has recently sold her company. So she got to invest 60,000 euros for 10% of the company. It's a quite good valuation for just a PowerPoint.
So we have a lot of young audience listening to this. Just realize 2003 euros was a brand new concept. Just to understand how long ago we're talking about. Euros were just brand new. Okay.
Yeah. So you're telling me I'm really old then.
Yeah. Well, we are
right.
getting old.
Yeah.
So $60,000. Were you full-time working on this already? Or were you still studying and kind of trying to get this off the ground?
So we started off with trying to do it simultaneously, but then we realized that we cannot be here getting this money into the company and then try to just run off to a class. So we decided that, hey, let's put all the studies aside for 2 years and just fully focus on this. But then the second problem came that, okay, we have this money, but how are we going to build this system? How does it work? Is this something that you buy off the shelf? Or, I mean, we have no clue. So, but then this angel said that, hey, I have these perfect developers that I did a former startup with. You should talk to them. So we ended up actually giving them 37% of the company for them building the initial platform. So basically, before we even have started, we only had 53% left of the company.
But you could say they were like your technical co-founders?
Exactly. Exactly. And without them, it would be no Klarna today. And we realized that, hey, this is a big business idea. It requires a lot of competences. We need to be generous with the shares if this is going to take off. And we were very, very lucky. This was right when e-commerce in Sweden took off. So if we didn't do anything, we would have an internal growth of 30-50% because e-commerce grows so much. And we were just connecting more and more e-commerce platforms.
So how did people in Sweden pay in e-commerce? What was the platform before Klarna?
It was a couple of players, one called Dibs. I'm not sure they exist today, but it was credit card and people didn't like it.
Credit card through like the bank's widgets and this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more complex, but yes.
No PayPal?
PayPal was not popular at all. It was very rare. So when we got here and said like, hey, you don't have to pay in advance. You can just pay for it in these after delivery. That was very, very popular and took off. So we got like 60, 70, 80% share of checkout of people that really prefer to pay in this way in Sweden.
Wow.
So
what was your business model?
So the business model was that we charge a percentage transaction fee from the merchant.
From the merchant.
Then we also earn money on late fees if you don't pay on time.
From the buyer.
From the buyer. And then later on, we added an installment product. So you buy now, but you pay in 12 parts over 12 months or 24 months and so on. And it started to go really well. And in that business model, we earned an interest rate, of course. And that when we started this, it was quite hefty fees. We compared it to other players in the market.
So you're saying you were expensive?
Yeah, quite expensive.
Why?
Because I guess we could, and that was how the other players in the market were charging consumers. We just copied whatever prices they had, and this was a profitable business model.
What was the annual interest rate?
So you have one annual. It depends on what product you show.
Average.
It was different ones, but I would say it was like the most expensive one was 19.5% interest rate. But then you also add a fee for each time we bill the customer of €3. And if you add that together, the efficient interest rate is not super great. It's much nicer terms today, but back then it wasn't.
You had market power.
We had market power, and we were the only player that had like a new technical system that were out competing all the traditional banks by far. And the e-commerce just loved it because it just worked.
What was your role at the time?
So I was a deputy CEO, and I was basically the
so
man.
Does this mean you were like two equal CEOs? What does deputy CEO mean, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it was a second.
Okay, second in command.
Yeah, so Sebastian, the guy that came up with the idea, he was more of the leader type, the charismatic.
So let me ask it a different way. What did he do and what did you do?
So him being more of the charismatic leader, he was the man holding the vision, being more into the product, more into maybe being magnetic and towards getting the best people to join. I was the one more of the execution, being the managerial person. That no, we should not do too many things at the same time. Let's just do these things first and so on.
Okay. And the third co-founder?
He was more the analytical guy. He was a CFO and chief risk officer.
Important.
Yeah, also important. So I think that we worked together was just so luck now in hindsight that we worked very, very well, but also very, very important. I think we were equally important for the company.
And your tech co-founders, did they stay engaged through the evolution of the company, or it was just a one-off?
One-off. They left after 9 months.
That was expensive.
It was quite expensive.
In today's dollars?
It was quite expensive. So they did a good ROI per hour invested, I guess.
Okay.
But they took a risk as well.
Yeah.
So this was fantastic. I mean, I was working like crazy. I lost a lot of friends. My girlfriend broke up with me, but I had like the eye on the target to be financially independent. And
so help us understand more or less the scale of the revenues of Klarna. Like you went from zero. What happened in the first year, second,
so
third?
150,000 euros, and then it was about 1 million euros, and it was 3 million euros, and then it was 9 million euros, and then it was 21, and so forth. And 7 years in, we were able to get the Sequoia Capital to invest, and we had term sheets.
How much revenue did you have when Sequoia came in?
I think we had, I don't remember. I would assume, I think the valuation was 100 million euro valuation. So maybe the turnover was maybe, I'm guessing maybe 20.
Those were different days, but yeah.
Yeah, it was. I could be completely
Nowadays,
off.
100 million valuation means a really good deck.
Yeah, exactly. Back then you had to fight for it, right?
Yeah.
And so Sequoia Capital come in, and then just 1 or 2 years later, DST and General Atlantic invested in that transaction. I was able to sell off my first secondaries.
Okay. Why did you sell?
I guess to secure some capital, but also I wanted to do and fulfill all the things in life that I had as expected. I mean, this was a dream of my life. I dreamt about buying this expensive flat, this sports car, and these expensive clothes, and I mean, living the dream life, right? So I sold off $10 million of shares. So I went from being in debt into being financially independent. just 3 days later, I had a conference in San Francisco. We're going to get the the Crunchy Awards and the Tech Crunch. And I decided that, hey, why don't I stop by in Las Vegas and celebrate?
Sounds
great
terrible.
idea. And it was just too short notice. No one could join. So I went by business class for the first time. You know, you go to the left instead of the right. You get a glass of champagne instead of being yelled at. And I checked into this big panorama suite at the Encore in Las Vegas with tons of marbles. And I went out to order expensive wines I couldn't pronounce and seafood I don't really like.
How old were you?
So now I am 30.
Okay, so you're not like a baby.
I'm not like a baby. So I should be mature, even though I wasn't.
I'm not judging, but
yeah.
30-year-old. Okay, but it's different if you're like 21. You know. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So you're 30-year-old, but you went from $0 to $10 million in your bank account.
Yeah. And then
what happens in Vegas?
Yeah, and then going back again to the hotel, I start getting this bad feeling in my stomach. It's like, oof, do I really sleep better in this expensive bed compared to my IKEA bed at home? Did I really like that wine? Could I taste the difference between that and my cheap bag-in-box at home? These clothes, they're exactly the same material as my H&M or Zara clothes. And oof, what is this? And then I couldn't unthink that, and I started to go in a negative loop of like, wow, this is just a myth of that more money just gives you more happiness. And all of this like marketing of all of these happy people having all of these consumer goods is just fake. And I crashed eventually in that hotel room. It just felt so meaningless to start chasing the next dollar valuation or even more money for myself. I mean, it is a strong correlation with money and happiness, up to about 5,000 euros per month. Then it's a totally diminishing return curve. And I just experienced that in that hotel room. I think there is more
correlation with lack of money and unhappiness than money and happiness, right? So close to zero is where everything happens. Now there is a threshold which is surprisingly low, where it really doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly. And then for me to like chase the next one,
you were way past this threshold, obviously.
Way past. You can only eat 5 times per day and so on. And I really don't like expensive food or wine anyways. I mean, I can taste the difference. I don't have a sophisticated taste buds, I guess. So, and this also made me start to reflect on many things. First of all, I mean, being born in the west of the world, that's just pure luck and coincidence, right? With great healthcare, great education, lovely parents. I mean, it's nothing about performance that I have done. It's just pure luck. And what have I given back during all of these years? I had this like egoistic life, just thinking about me. And if I cannot give back in one capacity, I mean, who should, really? And I also started to reflect on the company I had created. I mean, we were really solving this problem of people don't feeling safe buying online. We also solved for people that couldn't afford buying a consumer good. But if you widen that problem definition and you look into that issue, what is that really then something that is net positive to the world? I mean, in Sweden at least, the way we consume, we need 4 planets. And my contribution to this, enabling even more consumption from people that cannot afford buying the products in the first place, maybe. I maybe have a responsibility here. And then like feeling that I might be part of the problem here, not part of the solution. And I got all of this luck. I mean, I don't believe in God, but if it is a God, I mean, he would be so much harder on me if I should go to heaven or go to hell, getting all of these extraordinary resources, but not taking any extraordinary responsibility. So this eventually led up to that, hey, I need to do something different. So after 11 years with Klarna, I decided to quit and instead devote my time and wealth
the trip to Vegas was at your 11th year?
It wasn't. It was on my 7th year.
7th year. So it took 4 years to kind of... Okay, so this was not like a 30-second process. It was like a 4-year process.
Yeah, because Klarna went so well, right?
So let's understand the business of Klarna, and then let's see what happened next. So you said you were at roughly 20 million, and you raised venture capital money, and then you started going global, I guess, basically, right? So where did Klarna go? And for your time, like how far did Klarna go?
So quite well. I think when I left the company, we're at $2.5 billion valuation.
In revenues?
In valuation. Revenue-wise, what was it? I would assume a couple of 100 million euros in revenue.
And is that mostly interest payments? Is it the fees? Is like how is the split of this revenue roughly?
So the majority, the biggest part is actually fees from merchants.
Fees
merchants
from
offering,
merchants.
yeah.
So the original business model of just enabling this buy now pay later.
Yeah.
That's the bulk of the revenue.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And we charge them to offer these installments. We charge the e-commerce companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to understand the business, so you don't really have to do anything to get consumers. Consumers go to their e-commerces.
Exactly.
So your go-to market is getting merchants.
Yeah.
How did you get merchants? Or did they just come to you and you did?
No, that's never happened, right? So everyone that's been in B2B knows that doesn't happen automatically.
So you actually had to go to the merchants and convince them to install the widget, the plugin.
Yeah, so we realized quite quickly that in order to be in B2B and be successful, you need to be successful in sales. Mm-hmm. It's no shortcut. I don't believe in that anyway. So we built up a big sales department, being on the phone, calling up these merchants that, hey, do you want to increase your conversion rate? Then you should offer our payment solutions. And as you know, it's all mathematics. If you call 100 customers, you get 10 real conversations and maybe physical meetings. Out of 10 physical meetings, you get one contract. Mm-hmm. If you're then able to do 200 phone calls, you double your sales. Mm-hmm. And so we did. So it was a sales success in that matter as well. Okay. So I'm a strong believer that even though you're a tech company, you should also think about all these manual processes.
100%. Especially if you're B2B.
Especially
you cannot just pray that people will find you. So what are the rough economics of this? Like, how much did it cost to get a customer? Or let's say, how long did it take to recover the investment in getting customers? Because hiring salespeople in Stockholm, I'm assuming, is not cheap. It's a very expensive city.
Yeah, it is. But in 2005, the economy was not that strong. We were able to be getting contracts that didn't have any fixed salary. They were just paid on commission.
Okay. That helps.
So like models like that. And
so roughly how, did you were running sales at that point?
Was part of my responsibilities when I left. Yeah, I was
so more or less, how aggressive were you in investing in sales? Were you investing like 1 year's worth of revenue in acquiring a customer, 2 years, half year? How did you measure that?
I don't remember. I should know, but I don't remember. It's too far.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Was the company profitable at that point?
So we've been profitable since, it was just the first year we were not profitable, but since then profitable every year. Which you sort of have to be if you're a bank, because you're lending out a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're running at a loss, you need to take in a lot of equity.
Is it coming from your own balance sheet?
Yes, it is. And then we have a big portion that is debt as well, the absolute majority. Okay. Yes. But still, you need to have some equity to finance that debt. Just if you buy an apartment, you need to put in some equity as well, right?
Okay. And what is Klarna now? I know you're not in it, but from what you know, what is Klarna now?
So in terms of revenue, let's see if I get the currency right. Could it be like a 1.5 billion euro revenue company? I think it's, at my time we were 1,500 employees. I think they're 5,000 employees. The valuation, we were the highest valued private startup in Europe at the point of time. This was just 6 months ago, $45.5 billion. So good sizable numbers. Now they just did a round at a bad timing, and the valuation just plummet quite significantly to 6.5, I think.
Okay. It's still a private company?
Still a private company.
One of the largest private tech companies, or tech companies in general in Europe, right? In many ways, it's like the Stripe of Europe, right? It's similar area. It's also a huge, successful private company. So tell me about your conversation with your co-founders when you realized it was time to go.
So that was tough. I think that was what delayed this for a long time. So Victor already left after 5 years. And I really didn't know how Sebastian would react.
Sebastian was still the CEO.
Still the CEO.
Still exclusively working on growing the company.
Yeah, exactly.
Like hand in hand with you.
Exactly, with a time horizon that is like, I'm going to be the biggest and best in the world of what we're doing. And
so no expiration date?
No, the opposite. And when I had this dissonance in my body of like, what am I doing here? Is this really meaningful? And I went into happiness research that all showed the same thing, which was like a happy life is a meaningful life. Mm-hmm. And a meaningful life is often when you're not only for yourself, but actually contributing to others. And this didn't feel like that to me after this discovery. So eventually I was brave enough to have the conversation. And I did a lot of charades. Is that what you call it in English? When you like practice before how a person would react.
Rehearsal.
I did that with my fiance.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
She was your co-founder. Like she was playing your co-founder.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow.
And I remember this office. I went into this office and like, hey, Sebastian, I need to tell you something. But he took it so well, really, really well.
Were you tired at the time?
If I was tired?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was, but I was very lucky to never get like burnt out.
Okay.
So
that was not part of the equation.
A little bit. I mean, I worked very hard.
It's exhausting, right, to grow these companies at that massive scale.
Yeah, it was. Of course, that was tempting as well to just take 1 year off and just think of the next step of going into foundation work. So that was an upside as well, of course. No, so it was very relieving. He took it super well and was very encouraging. Understood where I came from.
So how did you manage that? He just hired somebody to replace you? Or already had an executive team where you could transition away without disrupting too much the company?
Yeah, I think that you always, especially me, you tend to like overvalue yourself, that you're so critical. But apparently the company managed very well without me.
That's always the case, right? I mean, even Steve Jobs died and Apple continued to do amazing. So if Steve Jobs can, move on, I think we all can.
Exactly. So it's other people stepping up and filling my shoes day one, I think. It was no problem for him.
How much money had you made from selling shares at that point, roughly?
So when I left, I decided that, hey, maybe the company won't survive without me. So I decided to sell off half of my shares. Once again, going back to the ego in me, narcissism. And then I just continuously started to sell off. And now I hold less than 1% of the company.
Okay. Because you didn't want to be part of it? Or you just wanted to have the cash to use it otherwise?
Yes, I wanted to finance my foundation. So I decided to...
But you could also put your shares in the foundation and let them grow.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I wanted to use those liquidity to do meaningful things. Okay. So I took in half of my wealth. I decided to put in as cash and sell off shares into this foundation, Norrsken.
Okay. And how much is that? How much does the foundation manage? I don't know if that's public information.
Yeah, it's fine. It's 125 million euros.
125 million euros. That's how much you put in this foundation. So it's never coming back to you.
Never.
It's starting to work on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
What is this foundation?
What's that?
What is this foundation?
So, quitting Klarna, I went into, where should I spend my time now to be of most value? How should I think about this? Should I sit myself in like a soup kitchen, handing out food? What would be a good, meaningful work for me? And it wasn't until I stumbled upon this concept of effective altruism. I don't know if you heard about it before. So it's like a philosophy, came from the 70s, and it's all about that you do maximum good per hour or per dollar invested. So it's really like thinking about giving back with your head or your brain and not your heart. And it turns out like the most effective charities are up to 1,000 times more effective than the least effective charities. So you should really like look at this from like an analytical point of view. And what it also says is that you should keep in mind and take in consideration what you have as skills. So if you're a really successful hedge fund manager, maybe the best you can do for the world is to continue to be a hedge fund manager and donate 10%. That's the Warren Buffett
dilemma, no?
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's doing it right. So he's an effective altruist, if you ask me. He's donating this
we'll see
massive...
what happens at the end, but so far...
Yeah, but so far he's been financing Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to a very significant degree, which had done incredible lot of impact. And another classical example is that if you a dog leading a blind person cost about 30,000 euros in Sweden to train. For the same amount of money, you can treat up to 1,000 people from a specific eye disease in some tropical areas. So if you only have $30,000, where should you use them? So if you believe that every person is equally value, you should of course then direct it to treat it from start. So what does this mean to me then? Yeah, well, I know a little bit about tech, I know a little bit about entrepreneurship. Those are the components I should use to try to do better world. And to me was that, going back again to my experience with Klarna, and what I saw was that, okay, I've been this successful entrepreneur, I'm receiving these prizes, I'm being recognized, and I see that I'm a role model to a large degree. I get invited to speak to other students. But at the same time, when I see like what companies people aspire to do, it's all about revenue and growth. No consideration whatsoever if you're net negative to people and planet. So if you're like, I don't know, let's take a more classical example. If you create this, it was another company creating these addictive computer games that just kept the attention span really low. If you're these social media companies.
I mean, alcohol, cigarettes, I think there are
even
easier examples to understand.
Maybe even easier, but even in tech, I mean, you can look at a lot of companies. If you define the problem really narrow, that, hey, I'm just going to connect as many people as possible over the world, you get more friends. But then, okay, but if you look a little bit from the outside, you can see that some of those solutions create mental health issues, create polarizations in society, and just a total lack of sense making. And it's like, wow, these companies are, if we just leave this as status quo, that this is what we're gonna copy and imitate as entrepreneurs, I mean, we're doomed. All of those, like, if you extrapolate those curves, just leads to collapses everywhere. So what the foundation tries to do is to instead, we want to put the spotlight and capital on startups that are actually solving societal and planetarian problems. We call them impact startups. They should be the heroes of our lifetime. So if you're like a top person out of a specific school, you should of course start an impact company. You can be just as wealthy.
That doesn't mean non-for-profit.
No.
And it doesn't even need to be like a B Corp or a social company. It can be like a for-profit private startup.
Yeah, exactly.
That has a mission that is aligned with what you believe the world needs, or
exactly.
you as a team.
Exactly. So one company that we backed in Sweden is Northvolt. They're building the world's greenest battery for Volkswagen and Volvo.
Okay.
So for each unit of green battery out in the market is one less diesel engine. So it's like a one-to-one connection with a sustainability development goal for each unit of sales. Another example is Einride. They're building they're becoming the Tesla of electric trucks. So same thing there. So for each electric truck out on the market is one less of a combustion engine. So business models where you really interlink the impact with the sales. If we can make that as the next role models in society, I think everything will hopefully solve. Instead of imitating and not caring about what the net impact is of a specific company.
Why do you think that so far in the history of humanity, somehow we regulate, we didn't disappear, right? As a civilization, somehow, we managed to not kill ourselves through massive evolutions of technology. What makes you think that now we need to kind of regulate it? Even if it's regulated from a private initiative with your own money and then a foundation, why don't you trust that everything will be fine, I guess is my question.
Yes, I think that it depends on what time horizon you have. So the only thing we know that every civilization previous to ours have collapsed.
Has evolved.
Yeah, it depends on how you see it.
Here,
yeah,
no?
That's true. We're here. But still, a lot of civilizations have collapsed and then evolved into something else. So why would this civilization that we are in right now, with the power centers of US still being there, would that exist forever? Probably not. It would probably change. It would probably go into a darker period, then evolve into something else. I think what we have done now historically, up until nowadays, we have increased and the lifespan of human people, quality of life, less infants being dead when they get born. I mean, we improved on so many levels. But at the expense of the planet. We're extracting resources, we're paying the cost of that extraction, but we're not paying the cost of what it does to climate change and a million people dying from coal and so on.
So you're saying that we're getting into unsustainable debt with the planet, the same way that customers are with Klarna on the internet?
All planetarian boundaries, we're about to reach the end to it because we're not looking into the negative externalities of the business or the way we act as human people. So we're about to come to an end there. And I think we now need to look at and take responsibility of what we as individuals and what we as companies actually are creating with what we're doing.
And this is Norrsken. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think you do very well. Yeah, so we're trying to promote impact entrepreneurship and put the spotlight on that. And we do that in some different ways. So we have a large co-working space in downtown Stockholm. It's 450 people that work from there.
So it's the idea to just get like-minded people together?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
let magic happen?
so creating like a microcosmos of like everyone involved in that ecosystem to enable these companies to flourish. We have an impact VC firm of $120 million that we can invest into these companies. We have an accelerator, pre-seed accelerator with UNDP, which we can invest really early on.
Okay.
And we're building a similar house now that is just launched in Rwanda, in Kigali. It's 1,200 people in there.
So that's a co-working / accelerator.
Yeah, it's like a combination. It's creating this ecosystem. But what's most exciting, of course, is what we're doing now here in Barcelona.
What's happening in Barcelona? Marc,
so
that's
here,
your cue.
Sorry for the monologue.
I think that it's important to know your story and all the context that actually what's the genesis of Norrsken. And here in Barcelona, we are opening what's going to be the third hub of Norrsken, and it's going to be the biggest one in Europe. So Stockholm will not be the main one anymore. It will
really?
We will
biggest in what size?
In terms
like
of
meters,
square meters. So it's gonna be almost 10,000 square meters building in front of the beach. For the people who know Barcelona a little bit, in Barceloneta, with amazing sea views.
Can we say exactly where?
It's at the end of just close to the W Hotel.
Next to the W Hotel.
Yeah.
I guess everybody knows.
Yeah.
If you've been to Barcelona, you've seen the W Hotel. Okay.
So we think that at the beginning, we thought that it was important to have a landmark building because, as Niklas was saying, it's important to put impact entrepreneurship in the spotlight to act as a kind of showcase. And of course, some people are getting familiar with the concept here in Spain, or if we extend it to the region to Southern Europe. But we think that physical things actually help to understand and to put a name on an ecosystem. We've actually here in Barcelona, I think that a few years ago we had an amazing experience when Barcelona, the city that was acting as an ecosystem, decided to take the Pier 1. And I think that this really acts as a catalyst for the ecosystem. So that's why we really believe at the beginning as first step to invest on singular buildings that can become the house of impact entrepreneurship. And since we will have a lot of square meters, that of course we're going to cater the need of impact entrepreneurs, we also want this to become a hinge between impact entrepreneurs and other actors like different tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, academics, that they want to somehow be part of the solution as well.
And what's going to happen in this building next to Barceloneta?
The first thing is it's going to act as, in one part, as a co-working, but...
So how do you decide who can go into the co-working? Do you have to qualify as an impact entrepreneur?
You basically have to qualify as an impact entrepreneur. This, at the end, it's quite subjective.
It is subjective.
It's subjective. I think that we can try to get closer to perfection, but we will never get it. And at the end, you have to cut at some way. We will also...
And people will have to pay for this co-working.
Yes, but it's going to be subsidized.
Okay.
So the rent is going to be very, very attractive. Okay. So at the end, we want to make things easier for impact entrepreneurs. And we understand that providing state-of-the-art facilities and also a place that allows them to show the world what they are doing, and especially to, that one of the key components for tech startups is to attract and retain talent. We think that the place where you work, it's important. We don't really believe on remote working, that maybe on mixed models, but we think that the current model is gonna stay. And we want to put the best facilities and everything that they need, and that makes it makes it easier for them. On top of that, we are going to have a lot of content, a lot of events that the aim is also to give them an opportunity to explain what they are doing and to connect with other actors.
Okay. And is the venture arm somehow also localized, or that's centralized in Stockholm?
We are going to have, still on discussion, but we are going to have some kind of venture arm.
So how do you measure the success of the Barcelona hub, like 5 years from now?
I think that, first of all, I think that for us it would be important that this is a vibrant space and that we really fill it up. And I think that one success metric that we use a lot in Norrsken is that people live our space. That means that these entrepreneurs are growing and that there's a moment that they cannot stay with us.
So the success of the companies that go through the space, basically.
Yes.
The fact that they are alive, it's already a success.
That they are alive and that they have grown so much that there's a moment that they need their own space.
Graduation rate.
Yeah. And I think that since all these companies they are focusing on one of the SDG goals, if they grow, we understand that the impact is growing too. So that's why it's important that at some moment they eventually leave our premises.
So is this, how does it work? Is this a sub-entity that is a Barcelona Spanish foundation that is started and funded by Norrsken?
It's basically,
how does the money flow? Like, is this a money-making entity? Is this a money-losing entity? How do you see this? Like the whole setup?
Yeah, so we're basically 4 co-founders into this. It's Marc, it's a Norrsken foundation, but it's also the founder of Desigual, Thomas Meyer. He has a big role in this. And the 4th one is Sander van Diesel. So we're 4 people coming together to do this. So part in is all co-owned by us.
But it's going to be called Norrsken Barcelona?
Norrsken Barcelona, yeah. So the idea at the end, for practical terms, it's going to be what in Spain we call SL, una sociedad limitada, as Norrsken is also acting because that's what makes things easier. But at the end, what we want is to reinvest. So at the end, we are here to we work for the entrepreneurs and we really want to help them. And also...
So where you get the money from the founders? The capital, you get it from the founders?
The capital on, well...
I mean, these things you said cost money. Everything costs money.
The founders,
these things you said sound expensive,
nothing
right?
Can be for free, and because when things are for free, no one values it. So in this case, the people, the entrepreneurs are gonna pay a rent. It's gonna be subsidized. It's gonna be much cheaper, but they are still...
But if it's subsidized, where does the money for the subsidy come from? From the founders?
Here we are getting a good deal on the premises that allows us also to have small rents, and then we will have different activities. Especially something that's important is our network of partners, and our partners really help us a lot on making this a cheaper space for entrepreneurs.
So I'm trying to understand. So you're trying to make it sustainable.
Yeah,
you're trying to make it break even or profitable.
Yeah, we're trying to make it break even.
Break even.
Yeah, at the end, it's this doesn't have to be a cash cow. That's not the purpose of this.
And if it is a cash cow, does the cash go to the founders? Does it go does it have to stay there? I don't know how you regulate
this. If at some moment, for any reason, it starts to become a cash cow, what we should do is to lower the rents and maybe reinvest on other initiatives that help entrepreneurs.
I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? Like it is hard to take things off the ground. But
we think that it's good to reach break even or being slightly profitable because that's what gives you independence, and otherwise we would be trapped on the charity model. That's something that we don't want to, but on the other hand, it doesn't have to be a cash cow. And if we are so good at attracting partners, organizing events that for some reason they made us make more money than the one that we were initially planning, the idea is to reinvest it into the ecosystem.
Yeah. And from Norrsken's perspective, is even more profits coming out of it. Our vision is, of course, to open up in more cities. I mean, the problems we're facing now are of a global nature. And even though we want to turn in Barcelona to the capital of impact, I mean, it makes sense to have these kind of ecosystems in other cities as well.
Why Barcelona?
I mean, it is already now and have been for a while one of the key cities in Europe when it comes to tech and entrepreneurship. There's a lot of unicorns coming from here. It's super popular. I think it's increasing in traction as well.
Absolutely, we're working on it.
Yeah, you're doing a very good job.
But there's London, there's Berlin, there is Stockholm, there is Paris, right? So these cities have a bigger ecosystem than Barcelona. For now.
True.
We're working on changing that, but for now they are bigger entrepreneurship hubs. So why do you choose Barcelona instead of these other cities?
Yeah, so the combination, I think, with it already now being an attractive city in terms of size and what's happening, but also that we found the perfect partnership.
Okay.
With Thomas Meyer, with Marc, and with Sander. And to me, that's my experience building Klarna, is all about the people. So my job as a manager is to spend 30% of my time just to recruit the next leaders all the time. A little bit exaggerating, but it's all about the people. And we found it here. And maybe then going back as well, what the 5-year plan is. I think that one part is that we think that this and hope this is going to be like a very thriving, great ecosystem and a place that you really want to work from if you want to be part of the solution. But also that we put impact entrepreneurship on the spotlight so that the next talent from Barcelona, they want to start another Submer, which we also have invested into, instead of another online casino or whatever.
Funny enough, before I knew that you were coming, I was looking at your website, and the thing that got most of the time that I spent on the website was a part where you were trying to measure impact, or you were measuring impact. I guess I think you were trying to measure impact, and it's really difficult, no? Because from what you say, I hear a very subjective wish. You have an idea on how you personally would like the world to be. Right? And that's totally fine. I think we all have ours. It's amazing that we do. But now you want to start putting a lot of money working towards, the world going in this direction, and you call it impact, and you more or less need people to agree that your definition of impact is aligned with Marc's definition of impact, and if I get involved in my definition. So how do you define and measure impact? Sounds like a really difficult thing to do.
It's a very difficult thing to do, and I don't think it's one unifying KPI to measure it all. So, and we've been working with this and still are working, and we'll never find the perfect model. But our definition is that the externality or the total impact of a business, if they are actually solving a real sustainability development goal for each unit of sales, it's impact. If it's just making it neutral, it's very good as well. Of course, you don't putting the world in a worse spot, but this we don't qualify it as impact. It has to have a meaningful progress to the SDGs that the company is, such as Submer, once again. So for each unit of their servers, it's 50% less energy to a normal server, which has a huge impact on energy efficiency and in the length climate change.
And we think that SDGs, that's a framework. It's far from being perfect.
What is that? Tell us what that is.
I think that Niklas maybe can explain a little bit more, but that's what the UN define as the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and there are things like no poverty, access to health, life in balance on the planet, on the sea. There are some more generic goals that they really apply on developing countries. That on that case, we think that would not be fair to consider it as a goal here. But this is a framework that a lot of people are using. As I said, this is far for being perfect, but it helps us to say, okay, is this company targeting at least one of these goals? And if it is, what we say is that impact is going to be a traditional growth metric. So that can be revenue, that can be user growth. So we try to make things very simple. We don't want to have this admin monster where we are trying to qualify, because I think that at the end probably we would reach a similar conclusion. So it has to be something that it's really embedded on the business model. And I think that here, for example, in Barcelona, we have companies that they are not called impact, but they're, to my understanding, they are impact, like Wallapop or Wallbox, for example, that they allow a transition towards electrification, or in the case of Wallapop, to make the economy much more circular. And the more that Wallapop grows, the more savings that we have in this regard. So we think that this is a good example, and you cannot take the impact part of it. Or, for example, another company that was here and that I was part of it, that's Eura. The more that it grows, the more sustainable meat that we have, and the more that it contributes to reducing the CO2 footprint. So, and we think that the metric has to be, in that case, the revenue, for example, as long as the company has a clear purpose of solving one of the SDGs.
Yeah, and to be even more specific, so the way we measure impact is that we use a model called theory of change. It's a model that seems to be quite widely accepted.
You came up with it?
No. I'm not that smart.
Well, you or somebody in the team.
Yeah, exactly. They are very smart, so they could have come up. But these have existed for some time, and it really looks at impact in 3 different lenses. If you take a classical example of Tesla, so the way you look at this is first look at output. So Tesla, they produce 1 million cars per year. That's output. The outcome of that is that it actually saved 2 billion tons of CO2. But the impact, the third stage of that is really that they influenced Volkswagen and Fiat and Volvo how to produce cars. So that's a real impact that Elon Musk should be super proud of. So we look at each company in these 3 different ways of looking at output, outcome, impact.
Okay, so I agree, but I want to play devil's advocate here because a lot of people, Tesla haters, will say that the electricity that you're using is produced by fossil fuels, and it can be either as bad or worse depending on how they do the numbers, and they will tell you that some minerals and some materials for the batteries and for the production of the car has actually worse environmental impact than a normal diesel car. So they can do the numbers, and I've seen them done 1,000 of times, and they can claim rationally and objectively that actually Tesla is bad for the environment. So, like, how do you decide which one is true? You just say, that's my opinion, I like Tesla, or you go all the way to the bottom of it until you have a perfect, absolute, objective measure of this?
No, it's a very good question. And I think that in the investment committee of the different investment vehicles, this is what we debate. Is this impact? Is this not the impact? What's the total impact of this and so on?
Yeah. But it's very difficult. How do you measure the impact of extracting these minerals for this part of the battery? I would have no clue where to begin.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
But our assessment is that Tesla on the net has a positive impact.
And I think that I agree, obviously, but you know.
And it will not come in synchronicity. I think it will come a little bit sequential. So they start here. They're much tougher on their suppliers and how to source their minerals. But it will take some time before we know that that is completely a circular system. Yeah. So we will see different innovations for different parts. And hopefully in 50 years in the companies we support and invest and promote, in total they have really moved society to a better place.
And I guess another case is like, you said that you felt that people buying for stuff they couldn't afford was bad for society in the long run. But what if we find this example of this person who's unemployed and wants to start, building something but needs an investment, and then thanks to Klarna they can buy a sewing machine and they start producing handmade wallets, they sell them on Etsy, they start having cash flows, they pay back the sewing machine, then with more credit they buy, I don't know, whatever, like more machines, and they have a business, and then they go out of poverty thanks to credit, thanks to Klarna. How do you know that it is destroying more than it is creating or enabling? Like, do you have a study or research that says that people buying more than their liquidity allows today is a net negative thing? Or is just a feeling?
Yes, a very good question. I think that, and I've been through this in my head many, many times, and there's no research paper showing if Klarna, for example, is a net positive or net neutral or net negative. I think that when I was still part of it and still responsible, the rates we had, I think were too high. So the consumer buying stuff could end up paying twice the next year, twice as much. That is like not sustainable. Now,
I don't know.
It could be if you buy a computer and that enables you to go into this university and then you're able to pay off and so on. But I think on average, I'm not sure that's a good solution. Maybe it's better than to take a cheaper bank loan to finance that part. Today, Sebastian has taken draconian measures and he had increased that so that the rates are probably the best among all the peers. So now I think they're in a different position. And I think this is a reason why they're being hurt on the stock market, but in the secondaries market.
Who knows what's happening in the stock market nowadays? But
it's crazy.
One question though, it's interesting. I would define you as a capitalist person. Like, you have created billions of dollars of capital through your execution, your idea, hiring people, raising money, right? Like creating an economy. So you have done a really important role in the capitalist system. Why don't you think the market is able to kind of take out this unsustainable mechanism? Because usually there is like a very strong force that aligns things, right? And gets rid of things that are not sustainable. Because if they're not sustainable, it's like evolution. People just, stop doing that. And why do you think this needs intervention?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I asked if you look where we are in society, if you look at climate change, for example, we're so dependent on economic growth. We really enjoy it. I love the AC here in this room. I wouldn't take it away. So we're becoming like short-term incentivized to keep it on as it is. but never looking into what this means in the longer future. So I think that we as humans and we as societies are just bad in taking in those negative externalities, and it will take time before we correct as a market. And I think market will always be behind, which makes sense. You cannot regulate too much in advance. But if you look at like the advancement of all different techs out there, I mean, it is increasing by the day, right? It's exponential. So if you look at where AI could turn up, and you see that all different companies are competing, the states are competing, and everyone has like a race to build an even smarter AI, to build maybe weaponized weapons on it. Yeah. Otherwise, your competitor would do it, and we're doomed.
Completely.
And that race, if you just extrapolate that for AI, synthetic biology, for things that influence climate change, for all different aspects, I mean, you're introducing some global risks at scale. Mm-hmm. And that just makes me a little bit scared. So even though we are in a good place here right now, that might not be the way we are in 100 years from now, especially not looking into that other civilizations before us have ended up in dark periods.
It is fascinating how fast technology is evolving.
So fast.
We go from AI not being able to play Spotify, to mention another successful Swedish company, and play your favorite song. Like you might be struggling with CD for 10 minutes. And then you see this beautiful piece of art or this text auto-generated that sounded like science fiction 1 year ago. And now I was playing with OpenAI's GPT-3 and then DALL-E the other day. And I was like, and I'm a computer scientist, so I should understand more or less what's behind it. And I'm like, how is this possible? Like, how did we get there so far? No? So it is a bit scary.
It is a little bit scary. Yeah,
I agree. But we tend to eventually use technology more for good than for bad, no? Otherwise we would be gone. Like we had like a lot of technology, like atomic, technology. I mean, we eventually used it for good.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, for the first time in history, we're all like have the power of gods almost.
Yes.
But we don't have the wisdom of gods. I mean, we don't know really how to steer this into like a flourishing civilization. And if we continue to celebrate growth at any cost, if you're an entrepreneur, you reach a certain valuation, you celebrate that, you get a prize from the prince or whatever. If that's what we define as role models and success, I think we will be in trouble. I think we need to be much more sophisticated now in 2022 to look into what are the net actions or net result of what we're doing.
So let's go back to Norrsken in the investment arm. So you mentioned that there is the space, which we have now 3 houses, or soon to be 3 houses. By the way, when do we open the house in Barcelona?
That's going to be, let's say, Q3, second half of next year.
2023.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So
it's like a big project.
It's a big project.
Is it already happening?
It's already happening, but there's a lot of renovation to be done.
Okay. So second half of 2023.
Yeah.
Good. So we have the space. We have the accelerator, which is somehow, as I understand, also related to the space because it's like, I guess, cohorts and stuff like that of people starting up together.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. So it's like we had 2,500 applications all over the world. We select 20 of them. And they are in Stockholm for 2 months and have been supported by 115 mentors, a lot of them unicorn founders. So I think we hope it will be like the Y Combinator of impact.
Will you also do this in Barcelona?
We were exploring and talking about it every day. How can we also provide capital in a meaningful way to the ecosystem? I think it's needed at different stages. So yes, we're exploring ways of doing it.
And then tell us about the venture arm. I think you said 120 million euro fund. How does this work?
So it is a for-profit VC firm. Standalone. It started off with, when I started the foundation, we got a lot of inbound leads and thought that, hey, oh wow, so you can actually combine, you can actually invest in technology that actually has a meaningful impact. And then we thought we're going to scale this, but the institution said that you cannot combine impact with profitability. It is a trade-off. It never worked previously. So we don't want to invest. So the only money we could find was from 3 other unicorn founders, the founder of King, the founder of Mojang Minecraft, and the founder of Daniel Wellington, and Norrsken. We jointly put in 25 million euros. And we said that, okay, we will not compromise on impact and financial returns. So the maximum money you will get back is 1x, because we don't want to compromise. We want to go impact first and be legit into that. What happened was that, of course, the companies that had the best impact were the ones with a nice business model. And once again, connecting the revenue to the impact, they were the ones that scaled the most. They could hire even more people, doing even more impact, as well as earning money. And that's when we realized that, hey, it's not a trade-off. Let's prove now to the world that you can combine impact and profitability. Because if the investors into VC funds understands this, that will really enable the capital needed. So if you look at, for example, the SDGs that we've been talking about a lot here, we need 16 times the money to finance the SDGs. You cannot solve that with charity.
What do you mean? I didn't get that.
So all the United Nations have put up these 17 goals, right? To end poverty, to enable life underwater, life on the planet, and so on. To finance, to be able to reach that, a sustainable planet, the money going into this now is way too less.
Okay.
So we need 16 times.
The money going into what? Like the...
Sustainable solutions.
Okay. Worldwide.
So I think it's between 1% and 2% of all capital is now impact, which means that the other capital...
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but we need 16 times. No,
okay.
It's not. Especially not when you can see like the 98% is net neutral.
Yeah.
Or even...
negative.
Yeah, exacerbating the existing
It's probably larger
problems.
than 1%. What's going to negative impact?
Very much more. So we need to change this, right?
Yeah.
We need to change this. And now I lost the thread. What was the question again?
Sorry, no, you were talking about the fact that you can make money through impact.
Right. Yeah.
And
that's
that more
the main
money needs to
vision.
go into impact.
And that's the mission. So we're going to try to prove that with this VC fund, we have stellar impact, meanwhile having stellar returns.
So you have LPs.
We have institutional LPs.
Institutional LPs, like as any
EIF,
other.
Some Invest, the Nordea.
And they have a target of making money on their money.
Yeah.
And then some of them are non-profits and they want to use it for their good causes. Some are like for-profit, wealthy people that they just want to make more money.
Yes, I would say like almost all of it is for profit, except
So it's just people who
Norrsken's.
want more money. I mean, Norrsken wouldn't mind more money to do more good things, I guess.
Exactly.
But-
Want to make more money by investing in companies such as Submer, Northvolt, and the likes, where we can combine this. Because if we can prove that, even more impact VC funds will be created to finance even more impact startups.
And how's that going?
Quite well, or
How
very
much
well.
did you invest already?
So we're fully deployed in this one. So now raising the next successor fund.
So you already invested 120 million euro?
Yeah.
Wow.
We saved
It takes
some
a
for
while
follow-ons.
to invest 120 million euro. It takes a while to invest so much money.
So we launched this 2019 already. So we've been investing now for 3 years. So we're in the middle of the next one, which will be bigger. So far so good.
What's next for Norrsken?
And then just something that I would like to add on top of that, there's also direct initiatives that I think that it's also worth mentioning, that these are direct investments that the foundation is doing where the returns are so long-term or there's such a risk on the project that no venture capital firm would take
so
it.
from the foundation's money directly without having to justify financial returns in a predictable timeline, for example?
And here, there's the last project. It's been a 4th-generation nuclear project that I think that in the base case, the reactor is going to be ready for 2028. So this is kind of long-term. There's also one project that's combining psychedelics with mental illnesses. And these are the kind of projects that take guts and probably where most of the venture capital firms that at the end, and that's normal. I mean, they aim for kind of short-term returns they could not invest, and that's why where foundations can play a different role, and I think that this is important mentioning.
Yeah, and another example is that we launched a corona testing lab in the beginning of pandemics. It runs 25% of all tests in Sweden. So it was quite important infrastructure in the beginning of that. But I think the initiative that we probably poured the most donations in, because it's an own foundation, is called 29K. 29k.org. And the story behind that is that it stands for 29,000 days, because that's the average time you have on Earth as a human being. I mentioned that it was so important for me to get to take therapy when I was struggling with these questions. And I think every person should go to a therapist to see their shadow sides and discover their parts of the ego. and so on, and why they're acting the way they're doing. So with 29K, we want to enable that for everyone for free. So the best scientific evidenced interventions from researchers, we put in them in this app for everyone to be able to do, and then go in and share that with peers in that network. So basically trying to increase the level of consciousness to some degree, and also the level of wisdom we have as a society. Because I think that if you don't know your own motivation and who's behind the CV, who's behind those feelings, I think some other aspects could be tough to deal with as well.
So having, I guess, before what's next for Norrsken, if we stop today, no, do you think you have already paid back your debt? Like, do you think you have a net positive with the money you generated from Klarna and everything that you've started from Norrsken? How do you measure this? Because maybe going back to this, how do you call it, effective altruism, right? So maybe you're talented in actually starting fintech companies, and you should start 3 more fintech companies and then make a lot more money, and then put that, maybe that's 3% of the 16% that we need. I don't know. Like, how do you see if you have reached that point? I guess these are questions that at a different scale, but also people like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett also ask themselves. Obviously, their answers are different, because Bill Gates stopped operating and making more money, and then he went into deploying the money, while Warren Buffett is 90-something already today, and still generating more money and donating some, but most of it is still being reinvested. So how do you measure when to stop creating wealth if you're skilled at doing that?
Right, that is a very good question. I don't know. Have I paid back, sort of? I think that luckily Klarna is a much more consumer-friendly company today. So I don't think.
Why did it change?
I think we all realized that we had put the merchant in too much focus, and we don't really care as much about the end consumer and their shopping experience. And I think that we started to realize that
the founders, the management team, the investors.
Founders. So I think Sebastian was really in the lead here, taking these brave decisions to actually cut a lot of revenue and profit generating areas to enable a really smooth, nice experience from the end customer coming back. So I think that has a lot, I think, to do with how much debt I have to the civilization or society. But then I think that going back again, the motivation why I'm doing this is maybe it started a little bit out of guilt, but I think that I never ever in my life felt more meaning into what I'm doing. Sometimes I'm running to work because I think it's so much fun. So I don't think that one part of the reason is like that you should go into Impact because of that you might have a greater responsibility if you're born in the West, for example, but you should definitely go into it because it's so much fun, so much meaning to both be able to earn money. I do it through foundations, and not for me because I have enough aside, but if you can do that as well as doing a better world. And that's my main motivation today. I wouldn't do this if I didn't think it was super meaningful and fun.
Yeah, you don't have to, obviously. Yeah. So what's next for Norrsken now? What's going to happen in the next few years?
I don't know. I think we're going to have plenty of work to turn in Barcelona the next capital of impact in the world or in Europe. But who knows? Maybe we can open even more cities if this becomes successful. I think we're going to hopefully able to raise even more capital going into Impact. But most importantly, maybe inspire other entrepreneurs to do something similar. So if you are successful entrepreneurs, it would be great if they could start their own ecosystem somewhere. It doesn't need to be Norrsken. Because I think the beauty of what we're doing is that if these companies win or if this win, we all win. So it's like, it's no competition in this area, which is like fantastic. So if this can be an inspiration, it would be really, really meaningful and great.
So basically, keep going.
Keep going.
Does this have an expiration date for you? Do you feel like Sebastian about Klarna, where you're just set for life? You're just doing this forever?
Yeah, today I cannot see anything more fun thing to do. So yeah, it will be very hard to go back to start another fintech company. So I'd rather invest in great fintech companies in Africa, for example, which we do with our Africa 200 million euro fund that we think are changing the continent in a good, meaningful way.
And you, Marc, do you have a horizon for Norrsken Barcelona?
Not really. I think that...
Is it your full-time dedication?
It's my full-time dedication, and I would say that it's the first time that of course, in a very different scale, but I'm also coming from the tech industry. And as I said, totally different scale, but also there was one moment that I felt like I reached the top of the Maslow pyramid, and that actually I had to take a sabbatical to reflect on what I wanted to do next. And I also realized that money was not making me more happier. And I think that that's the first time that I really feel that I can help, and I feel that I'm very fortunate to the life that I've had. Also, first because I was born here in the West, I had all the opportunities that that many people cannot have, and I was lucky also to be in the tech industry at the beginning, because I think that at the end this is pure luck, which gives me a wealth that also gives me the freedom also to endeavor in such a project. So I see here a long run. I think that there's a lot to do. Actually, there's a lot going on. I mean, we are not, and I think that it's also fair to say that we are not the first ones. Here in Barcelona, there are already other organizations like Ship2B that they've been into this for a long time. They even have a 50 million euro fund. And I think that this is it's a team effort. And I think that if we can really inspire others and help that the ones that are already doing this, we can help them, that they become the new role models for society, that second generation entrepreneurs or third generation entrepreneurs say, look, before I start my next project, I'm gonna try to incorporate the impact angle. And also for talent, I think that one of the things that we should get is that the beautiful minds, especially here, they consider impact, and we've seen the same in the tech industry. I think that 10 years ago, when people that was living, when they were finishing business schools, they were just going to investment banking or big corporates, and suddenly, thanks to few tech startups here, they started to consider another path because there were certain role models. And I think that that's part of our job, to show that there's something else. And then, of course, always people are free to choose. I mean, we don't want to impose anything.
Yeah, our long-term goal is to not enable another unicorn, but enable another impact unicorn. Because if that can be like the next role model in society, not a company valued at $1 billion, but a company that is somehow influencing 1 billion people positively, then that can be like the next lighting star.
Okay, amazing. I like this idea. Who are the top impact unicorns in the world right now?
Oh, good question. I would probably regard maybe Tesla is getting there in the way they inspire other car makers how to produce cars. I think Wikipedia could be one as well, creating all of this knowledge.
So Tesla for profit, Wikipedia non-for-profit.
Yeah, and I think that even though we are very much focused on for-profit impact tech companies, you also need the charity side of the world. I mean, you cannot solve everything with business models. So I think that this is a team effort for all the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, Wikipedia is a counterexample, because one of the takeaways I was actually getting to is you need profits to have impact. Otherwise, you're not sustainable, right? So Wikipedia, I guess it's unfair because it's software and it's so cheap to actually run it that with a few annoying banners, eventually they raise enough cash to run this. But Tesla, there is no way you can do that without profitability.
Exactly.
So you do need profitability for impact in most of the cases. Do you have any relationship, or let me ask it a different way. Does the government and public money have any relationship with Norrsken?
So in Sweden, we have like an institution that invests in first-time funds. So they've been a big backer of this Norrsken VC impact fund.
Like Fondico here.
Like Fondico?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not an impact fund. It's just an economic...
Yeah, it is.
So it would also help a pure non-impact focused for-profit fund.
Correct, correct. But already now in Sweden, I think this is like part of the Greta Thunberg effect. The biggest pension fund in Sweden, which is owned by the state, their new mandate now is to only invest in impact. And I think this is I think Sweden has come a very far way here, Netherlands as well, and a couple of other countries. I think this will come more and more and more. the pension money should be spent on improving the world, not making it worse. So once again, but going back to, I think that if you are an impact tech company in Barcelona 5 years from now, you will hire the best, you probably get the most capital, and you hopefully get the most consumers because they more and more want to shop sustainable. So this will be the competitive edge. And if we can accelerate that a couple of percentage points, we will be really happy.
So you want the would your wish be that the governments would get more involved in initiative like yours, or would you like to mind your own business and keep doing it the way you have?
I know your government way too bad if they should get involved or not. But I think in general, I think this is a team effort. I think that we all have the joint mission of improving society. So if we can tag along, I think it's beneficial. What do you think, being from here?
Yeah, well, I think that it's desirable, but as long as it doesn't come with other costs and burdens. I think
slowing down bureaucracy, paperwork.
So, I think that of course it's desirable because at the end it's all of our money, and as a taxpayer, I think that I would like that my money is also going to these initiatives, but at the same time, normally, or at least our experience here in Spain, is that it comes at a cost, that there's a lot of burden and it goes against speed, and that also you understand because it's public money, so they have to take extra care. And it depends on that, I would say.
Yeah, but I think that one end solution, I think, is that when we get enough data and enough sophisticated, governments should tax negative outcomes, negative externalities. We should really look into what is the real cost of extracting this piece of oil to the entire society, and let's tax it for the total cost. Then that, if that's included then in all business models, then the market will self-regulate. Are we there yet? No. I think we need more sophisticated models, but I see that's like the next level of it's already an initiative going in this way, that every company should have an income statement, balance sheet, and an impact-weighted accounting statement. And this has been driven by Harvard. And I think this should come.
And
Interesting.
I think that on the regulatory matter, of course, I mean, policymakers, they have a lot of power, but also we have to understand that they have to get elected every 4 years. And you need...
Ironically, they're more short-term than many private initiatives.
So that's why we think that we focus more on the entrepreneurial side and on the technology. If we really allow the technologies that make that eating plant-based meat, it's much cheaper than normal meat, or the electricity, solar electricity or wind electricity, it's much cheaper. It will come in a natural way without regulation. So that's why I think that we focus on that and on what we have some leverage. That's not on the other part.
Good. So just before we wrap up, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is, you're probably an inspiration nowadays for many entrepreneurs, being, having created one of the largest tech companies in Europe. Who were the people you followed when you were a kid? Who inspired you when you were a kid or young growing up?
So when we started Klarna, to start off with that one, it was like a one shining company in Sweden called Price Runner. We're valued at $10 million. And they were like, wow, imagine if we one day can build a $10 million company. And then what happened was that Niklas Adalberth sold his Skype just a couple of years later for $2 billion. And just overnight...
You raised the bar.
Completely. Like, wow, can you build a unicorn out of Stockholm, this tiny country in the north? And I think that has such a big impact.
You clearly can.
You clearly can,
there are tons of them now,
And that as an inspiration was just so powerful. And that then connects to, if we can instead enable an impact unicorn to act in the same way. Wow, what an effect that could do to society.
Today, somebody inspires you?
Yeah, a lot of people. So I look most up to a guy called Daniel Schmachtenberger. He does a lot of work together with Tristan Harris that did The Social Dilemma. You've seen that on Netflix. And to me, they are the biggest thinkers out there on catastrophic risks and so on. So if you're interested in some of the concepts I was saying here, they are the brains behind it. So just Google or just look into Spotify and try to type in Daniel Schmachtenberger. Impossible to pronounce, but...
More Swedish unicorns.
He's American, actually. He's American.
No, I mean Spotify.
So
What do you consume? Do you follow podcasts? Do you read newsletters, blogs, follow people on Twitter? What is your main source of information nowadays?
Yeah, I guess going back a little bit to this, like that the attention span on average have gone down so much. So our ability to digest complex information and read books is I assume, lower. At least it is for me. So I just have a hard time reading books from start to end now because my attention span is gone. So I consume mostly through documentaries and podcasts while doing something else.
Recommend one?
So the Tristan Harris and Donald Schmachtenberger is obviously one. I think the Making Sense podcast is another one. Emerge is another one. It's a great podcast with great thinkers.
Good. We'll copy the links in the description. Thank you very much, Marc, Niklas. It was a pleasure and good luck. And we will see the space in the second half of 2023. Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to get involved or they want to participate or learn more?
On our website. Just follow us on our social media channels. I would say that's the easy way.
And what's the address?
It's going to be the address is going to be norrsken.org/Barcelona.
Perfect. We'll put the link in the description as well.
Thank you very
much.
Thank you.
And see you next week.
Somos un ecosistema de startups tech de Barcelona, creadores de Camalún, Kipu y Factorial, entre otras. Ofrecemos más de 5.000 metros cuadrados de coworking a startups y organizamos eventos diarios para discutir negocio y tecnología hasta la saciedad. Desde ITNIC Fund invertimos en equipos con capacidad de construir grandes productos y negocios. ¡Te esperamos!